here with that.
I see it closed yesterday, but I don't know about today.
Voice message. Hi. You're great green funeral.
Someone from Australia, she's in local. But she can't get trouble getting in. It depends when she tried to get into the isolation facility. This little chap who's trying to come home.
Defamation.
Into a room.
I think better write one of those myself too.
Nothing. It was more places now.
Because people are holding the blocking.
It's always probably. Have a look on my view and read on something else.
That one.
Yeah, she's told me she
She
tried
said,
to
I've
quick.
had enough. I said, let's just hang it out. But
Yeah, we'd like to.
from that, from now on, I forget. They're not doing anything. I just think that is in a documentation that's some get 3 months. And then I'm like, missing council and not before. I think I'm right. I mean, and when I heard that thing from her, it's like, there's someone on maternity when I got always pop round. They're going out to the because it's not their business. I think they got 6 people on their staff. Down here, because all you do, give that business needs, that's all you do.
I've been trying to get a meeting with Karina for quite some time. And I thought we nearly there, I got down on a but it's like, it's great. This is going to be an opportunity when the new manager comes to come up for you as a midwifery leader and let's look at what needs to be done. Yes, I just emailed them again. Yes, it can be there.
We're just waiting to see from Josh. The last straw was when they had someone on maternity and no one put on top of them and check on them the whole time. Really, that's sort of. Josh, yes. Amazing, and all the documentation for it, but they didn't get what it means. Who's the key thing? What? Secret private. I want to turn to reality. What is it with it? Go back to a week later, same time. Same time, week later, same time. Competencies, staff, the RNs, the basic care is very good from the healthcare assistants. Keeps me alive.
Always found the healthcare assistants when I've been up there and they come into proms, it's so enthusiastic. Yeah. It's lovely to see.
Been putting on lots of training up there, and the first 2, it's like, we don't need any training with everyone.
Is it 1 o'clock in the morning?
The day on the
Is it 1 o'clock? It's going to be fine.
I don't know, they
Through some of our transactions.
I don't know what it is. No action quite excited.
Probably.
Someone
Some good role model.
but yeah, this one's not clinical, but he's got age which
Criminal processing standards. To
Vice
don't have any to go to the salon.
What's also in fiction.
I think we might just start.
Okay.
And we might just,
When they
pick
come
on
in,
on some of our
I think
sections
it's help.
yes, okay.
and,
They
hopefully,
would have
yeah,
helped.
We've got
discussion.
GPs, maybe.
In the plateau. We've just been waiting for our live stream, but we're not quite there yet, so I thought we'd just carry on. Well, tuatahi, te taka. He honore, he kororia ki te atua, he maunga rongo ki te whenua, he whakaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Anei mātou e tuku mihi ki a koe e ihoa. Anaki tia mai ki a mātou I tēnei rā. Anaki tia hoki ki ngā whānau e noho mauiwi ana, e noho kauri ana, e noho rawa kore ana. Tēnei tā mātou I noi ki a koe. Āmeni.
Amen.
Tēnā tātou. Nau mai hara mai ki tēnei hui tuatahi. It's kauhau nei. Happy New Year, everyone. It's great to be here again and to be getting on with our business. And it has been, I really did just want to particularly thank our staff, keeping the business running over the course of summer. We all had the lovely opportunity to step back and take a breath, and I'm very conscious that that wasn't the case for everyone. So I did just want to really acknowledge that our health services have continued, and it's only because our staff that happens. So ngā mihi. I thought we might just push on with some of our transactional things, and then hopefully the live stream will be up when we get to the Consumer Council time slot. So we have apologies from Gavin, who's at a tangi, and Na, who's just finished a 12-hour shift. Robin, we're expecting to come via Zoom, but she's got sick whānau at the moment. So just moving on to item 2.1, schedule of interest. Has anyone got anything to add? Schedule?
I've added one. Thank you, and Rachel.
And is your animal welfare?
It's not here. I'm going to, I'll revisit for you and just update that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we'll note the schedule of interest.
Oh, sorry, I'll send through some too.
Okay,
I was looking at it today and I thought, oh, actually, I'm
it's not quite up to date. Okay. If we can all get those in order for our next meeting, that'd be good. Does anyone have any conflicts in relation to agenda items? Carl? Then if we can go to our previous minutes at page 8 from the meeting. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes? Any corrections? Carl? Just find my way. Then we just note and adopt those minutes. Matters arising. Does anyone have any matters arising in the minutes?
I have a question.
Yeah.
In respect to Gavin attended a meeting with the Minister in respect to Rhythm and Vines.
Yeah.
And I think I did ask recently though, the brief around Rhythm and Vines overall, does that happen in regard to us getting feedback about the whole activity, how it went, health issues, etc.? Do we have involvement in that debrief space? I mean,
Yeah, there's usually engagement.
Does that happen?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, there is a debrief after every event every year, a whole of services. So health.
And just, I mean, obviously in regard to this recent one, we had that death happen. I just wondered if there was any, well, again, I'm maybe conflicted now because I did volunteer at the Rhythm and Vines. So just wondered with the debrief, was there any, concerns or any needed to kind of up our game respectively, because we had that young man die.
I haven't heard any feedback to that effect, but no doubt that was a topic of discussion at the debrief.
So I guess the question you're really asking is, does the board get briefed on that debrief?
We can debrief you on the debrief, because we will have the debrief. Yeah.
Can we get that? Fabian?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, yes, thanks, Kim. Yeah, just understood.
Next one?
Yep.
That'd be great. Couple.
Thank you.
Any other matters arising? I just have one, and it's with respect to, we talked about the chair sponsor group on board professional development, and that there was a 1.5 day treaty and equity training that the Ministry of Health is putting together, that we didn't have a firm time frame, and that's still the case. But alongside that, in our annual plan, we've got an action for the board to actually have some treaty training. And so Matua Pita has been talking to me, and what we think would be useful is for him to organise a 1 hour session with the board at a board meeting in advance of that treaty training that the ministry rolls out, just as a intro precursor kind of thing. So I think that's where we got to with those discussions, Jim.
That's correct.
We were, if by any chance the ministry's training happens to roll out very quickly, then we'll look at that. But at this point, we're looking at having that 1 hour training. It's just as part of one of our board meetings in the near future. Action items at page 13. Jim, can you take us through, please?
Yes, that incident review report is now being finalised. They've got the information they needed. I just checked up on that last week around that. The COVID-19 review update is going through all the actions out of that, just to check and see where our progress on that at the moment. It won't get to March, it may be April. And we've got Donette and Taylor scheduled for the April meeting.
Any questions on the action items?
Yeah, I have a question. I wanted to know when we would be getting that suicide incident review report. In the minutes, it says that we're supposed to be getting it in February. This is the board meeting for February. Are we still expected to receive that report in February?
The update says there the report is now being finalised, so you won't get it this month, but you probably will get it next month. They've been waiting on some particular information to be able to complete it, and I understand they've received that now.
Yeah, I'm aware that it says that in the action items, but in the minutes under item 4, it says the suicide incident report will be available in February, which is different to what's been reported in the action items. So I just wanted to get clarity around when we would be actually receiving that.
Is that in my...
No, item number 4 of the minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry, when will we be receiving that report?
It isn't available at present.
And we will be receiving it when?
March.
Oh, March. Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions on the action items? Okay, just briefly moving to the inward correspondence. We've received our annual letter of expectations from the Minister, which will, a lot to do and to break even doing it. And we will do our very best endeavours. So you would have all had the chance to read it. And Jim, I think you've kind of highlighted the key takeouts from it in your report. I guess the question from me is to what extent this is reflected in our annual plan for next year?
In terms of the narrative, it will reflect all of those items in there because, as you will see, I think he says and he uses the word strong first up draft of our annual plan. So we need to ensure that all of those areas that the Minister wants us to focus on are in there. And also from the break-even point of view, you've already signalled break-even for DHB this next financial year and last year's annual plan. So that's consistent with what had been previously signalled. And that is also predicated on the advice that we've given that we should plan around the same level of funding increase again for this year. So in that forecasting that we did last year was to project on. That's how we got to break even in 21-22. So that's all in line with what the expectation was.
Does anyone have any questions on the correspondence? Cool. Okay.
So possibly the only other thing was just to note that the Minister is intending to have all the annual plans signed off by the 30th of June. So that will mean that we have to be snappy and the Ministry has to be snappy and the Minister too.
Okay, I think we might move now to our presentation on the Consumer Council. So we've got Nikki, Amelia, Georgie and Guy, is that right?
Close.
Okay. So we'll come up to the table.
It's coming.
All right.
I'm just seeing it back as I'm supporting it. I think it might run above. Yeah.
Troublemaker in the back row.
So we're in your hands, Nikki.
Right. Kia ora everyone. Nikki Deva. I'm actually a group manager now of Women, Children and Young Youth Services.
Kia ora, I'm Georgie Johnson. I am the clinical governance representative, and yes, I wear a variety of portai, but I'm just come along and we're doing this as a team effort together.
Kalina Tato, Media Brown-Smith, Quality and Risk Manager / Privacy Officer for the DHB.
So Guy,
I'm just here to support these two.
So Guy would have liked to be here too, because Guy has been kind of at the beginning of our journey. So why I particularly put 2015 to 21 is that a lot of work has been done around consumer engagement and leadership over the past few years. So it's not something that suddenly the Ministry and the Quality Safety Commission expect us to do right now. This has been going on for some years. So we wanted to I did write the whole journey, but we thought we didn't have time to kind of go through every part of it. So we focused on forward thinking and forward movement on this particularly. Obviously this is a response to improving equity. And Lisa Beatty, who's worked for Tairāwhiti Health as an advisor in the child and family space, always quoted this, and I think it's really pertinent to how we work in any agency supporting people. Is often we go in with our mahi, but it's actually you need to stop and listen to people's story first. And if people around the table want to read some stories, we have a couple. One with a mum who had a child with disability and who felt that she wasn't listened to, and we've also got Just Ask Judy, which some of you might have heard about. So if you want to read some of those stories that have actually been published around what it's like for people, experiencing services, then they're available. So Jim, do you want to talk to this a little bit? This is some of your handiwork, because we were trying to look at applying these principles through, how it would apply to the development of a consumer council. So,
this it's not really my handiwork in that the Ministry of Health have laid out for us how the principles from that have originated from the tribunal now coming out of the Y2575 work, how those principles are then laid out, and then how we may apply them as DHBs and other agencies in terms of developing up processes and programs about how to think about how we may be actioning those within that. So the description across the top, and then how you believe you're actually applying them to test that out to see what your actions are as a Crown agent in advancing those. So this is the first time we've used it, and it will be something that we can use and will use more often. It links with the HEAT tool as well, Health Equity Access tool.
So a few years ago, when we had a consumer engagement group kind of forming around how we would move this forward, and way back kind of a few years ago, there was a directive around having a consumer council, so that's kind of not new, but we were trying to come to terms with what would that framework mean to us. And I actually asked Mark Hauora to kind of reflect that in an image that had some meaning around it. So obviously we've got the change leader and his wife, Niwarika, and also what we was trying to do was reflect our large Māori population and look at how this kind of reflects our consumer engagement, how we want to improve in that area. So I would like to think that the board, whatever, and Jim and the group would take this forward, because I think it's part of where we've been, and it's no different reflecting where we are today than it was back then. I just wanted to acknowledge Mark in that way. Amelia, anything to say about this document? I don't know whether any of you are familiar with this document around engaging with consumers. So this is written a few years ago as well. Anything you want to add to that?
No.
It's kind of a guide for
But Health Equity Safety Commission had these documents out for public and for NGO providers, healthcare providers to utilise. But I guess the biggest take-home message here around engaging with consumers is that you do it in your daily work anyway, or should be. And part of this piece of work is around, I guess, getting information from the consumers that we wouldn't necessarily see as a healthcare provider or a healthcare worker. We would only be looking at it from our perspective and not theirs. So the book is actually quite good, and moving forward with that, they've actually got a quality safety marker out around consumer engagement that they're expecting DHBs to populate on a quarterly basis, which is around getting feedback from the consumer. And that's a narrative that they're expecting us to provide around how well we deliver our service or not. So they're asking DHBs to pop that into a three monthly marker so that they can benchmark against other DHBs.
So one of the common phrases is around the waiting room to the boardroom, around consumer engagement and leadership. So the minute that you're greeted, the minute you walk in the door, to how you work around the board table, the stories that you hear, the actual experiences that people have from the minute they walk into an agency. I didn't show the slide, but the work that we did with some of the advocates that work in the community, and not surprisingly that 95% of complaints are around communication. So it's really important that we kind of don't lose sight of basic communication, and how we treat people and listen to them is actually the fundamental part of this. So why you would have consumers on governance and other groups. Thanks, Rach. So this just shows the, starting from 2017, they were much more specific from the ministry asking for a consumer council. It's kind of, the wording has kind of changed a little bit over time around it.
Just checking we're live streaming, we are.
Live streaming.
And I know I don't want to use my voice. So basically, yeah, it's very clear the Health Quality Safety Commission, the ministry, have been wanting this to happen for some time. So a lot of work was done at that time to kind of think about what is right for Tairāwhiti, because we knew that in Hawke's Bay, for instance, the advisory groups, legislatively were still there, but they didn't have membership. And so the Consumer Council was set up, and Graham Norton was the head of that. He was also the chair of the National Consumer Council group. So his name will come up during the presentation. So that's where we kind of took a lead. I found Graham and I said, help. So we did a workshop or two when he came up of his own free time to talk to us about how a consumer council works in Hawke's Bay. And we also had other people around the country. A couple of us went to national workshops and things. So we had a kind of a feel for what was happening. But we talked to Jim and Guy and a few other people and decided that actually at that time, it wasn't appropriate to set up a separate council. So what we tended to, with Graham's support, and you'll remember this, Jim, that we opted for, because we had a clinical governance group, was to have more consumers on that group and have more of a consumer voice. Fortunately, we started with 3 and Georgie has carried the flag since. But in maternity and mental health, you know, consumer leaders is kind of part of how we run things. So, for example, in maternity, we've had 3 or 4 at different times, haven't we, Liz?
Yep.
And you know, they are top of the agenda. They are supported, you know, and that's one of the things, the learning things, that when they go to a national group, some of the consumer leaders don't get agendas. They don't get told what's happening. So it's really important, like, that it's not tokenism, that it's actually, if you're going to have consumer, and they really add a lot of value to the maternity quality and safety program, as Guy and his colleagues do to mental health. And Georgie, being on the clinical governance group, as a voice asking questions, what matters to whānau, or how does this work? So I've just kind of summarise that, but that was kind of how we presented to clinical governance and said, here's Guy Baker, he's now going to be your consumer leader, which was a bit of a stretch for some clinical leaders, the managers found that quite a stretch to have someone sitting at the table, but now it should be just part of the course. That was the journey. So that's just a quote. I'll just let you read for a minute. So Graham was the chair of the Hawke's Bay and National Consumer Council. Thanks, Rachel. So he also talked about the Consumer Council and how it ran in Hawke's Bay, and all of them are different, but obviously you want consumer input into submissions, proposals, kind of planning that you're going forward. So it's engagement at all stages of development, and I know that in some sort of situations, I've actually been party to people saying it's too early to bring in consumer leaders to participate, and I don't get that. I think it should be the minute you're thinking about it, get people in at the front, because it's actually quite insulting to bring people in when you're partway along and go, oh, you know, you can catch up now. We've actually done most of our thinking, but what do you think? You know, it's okay. People like Georgie want to see warts and all, you know, like they want to be there from the inception. So I think that's what he was kind of trying to say. And he certainly, when he was chair, he's not anymore, but he said, we don't want to have 50-page board papers to read before a meeting. We don't want a 50-minute PowerPoint presentation. We don't want to work like another bureaucracy. So I thought, I've never forgotten that, and I thought that was good. Make a stand and say you don't want to replicate how other things work. We want to get on with the business, but we don't want to actually have to sift through all of your bureaucracy. So a little snapshot of consumer councils are probably pretty much in most DHBs at the moment in some form. So Georgie and I are lucky enough to be involved in the National Consumer Council Chairs group, and I feel like an imposter because I'm not in that at all. So I've suddenly found myself in this group as a manager in the DHB, but what they use me for, because I've tried to get off, is
the connector. You're the connector.
to what to explain things, I guess, about what's happening in DHB, how things actually work sometimes, which is hard. It's quite hard to navigate the way that systems and processes and how things work. So what I suggested is maybe that what would be helpful to the CEOs and other boards around the country is really looking at what would make a consumer council thrive. So this will be available to people as well. But some of the things like coming in at the beginning of the process, the chair of the clinical governance sits on the Consumer Council and vice versa. There's shared pieces of work. More than 7 to 10 members is a little bit too many. Obviously choosing one thing to start with. I think some of the consumer councils feel that if they're given a whole lot of work or a whole lot of decisions to make, they're kind of a little bit, it feels a bit muddled, but give us a project or something that we can kind of see through and feel like we're successful. So these are just, yeah, hopefully it gives us all some markers for success. You can't input into every policy, but you're also not representing, I'm sure you feel like that, Julie, you're not representing every agency there possibly is. But the significant questions that you ask could change the trajectory of what happens in that particular meeting. There's different reporting. Who is the DHB support person? So not leaving a consumer council out there hanging with no admin support, no connecting support is not appropriate either. But also one of the things that other DHBs found is that if the staff in the DHB know how to interact with it, it's a bit more successful. So rather than go, I didn't know we had a consumer council, what do they do? I didn't know, you know. So there's a bit of socialisation and marketing around what that does before you start. So suggested structure, and most DHBs those groups would report through the CEO. And obviously that clinical leadership and management partnership with consumers is going to make things a lot better. So we thought we'd just kind of work this up. There are lots of the national group that Georgie and I sit on, there's lots of ways that these groups are formed. I know in one DHB it's literally a whole lot of families who are experienced an adverse situation or a serious complaint were asked to become the Consumer Council, which I thought was quite novel. In other DHBs, they've kind of got a matrix of representation across all of those areas. So we kind of talked to Jim yesterday and sort of what could that look like? So it's not, you know, it's not the final version, but it's certainly something to think about. And the clarity around who's not there is there's no DHB staff. So at that table. Yeah. So some terms of reference are quite onerous and some are quite simple. I haven't named the DHB, but I think the pertinent, and I tell it's nothing about us without us, is quite significant. But, you know, making sure that the consumer voice is heard, working collaboratively, maintaining networks, you know, inputting to strategic direction. So, yeah, we do a maternity annual report and our consumers are front of the whole document. You know, what they have to say is front and centre. So it's really just, it doesn't have to be rocket science, but it actually has to be meaningful and people feeling like they're actually making a positive contribution. So one of the things that people will ask about is, will I get paid? So obviously that's fair, and certainly in most areas in New Zealand and in DHBs, a consumer leader sitting constantly on a board or a group or a governance group would get paid, as would someone doing something coming in for a day. So we have some frameworks that we work with, and we try and benchmark a little bit within DHB so that we're not, you know, people move around, don't get a kind of a raw deal where they go. Obviously, iwi and wider engagement to kind of talk about this, and terms of reference, socialising, and what sort of time frame would we need, you know, what would be our time frame to have a consumer council up and running. So those are the things to kind of think about moving forward. And that's it.
Excellent. Thank you. So I guess firstly, does anyone have questions?
The boxes there were showing the host is required for the council members, and that's quite good. You indicated 7 to 10 members. There's 9 boxes, and a lot of those boxes would actually have quite a few, like 8 would have quite a few people in that one box sort of thing.
Yeah.
So just getting that really diverse makeup, we're quite comfortable with. It's going to happen that way.
Haven't really thought that far ahead, Andy, but I think you're right. I mean, obviously I didn't do my number crunching when we put that matrix up, but we did think about, you know, having a younger person than someone, you know, an older person. So literally age doesn't mean we're just going to pick someone between 0 and 100 to go. We did want to have a range. So again, the numbers and the mix of people represented to be looked at.
I'm not sure how you're going to pick them, but I've just been interviewing for the youth council, and there's a couple of candidates there that actually in the interview were speaking that way. So,
Yeah.
With age though, like every person who goes on that council will have an age. So, you know,
They could represent more than one, yeah.
And they could represent more than
From
one
age,
region.
Yes.
East Coast Māori.
Yeah.
Three in one.
Absolutely.
different boxes for sure.
Absolutely. That was just to give a snapshot of what it could look like.
the types of considerations.
I was just interested in the notion of consumer, because we're all consumers here too, respectively to the space. I was just looking up other councils that have, and Canterbury's got 11 people on these, but migrant communities, you know, I guess in the diversity of the space, how well we represent, as well as our LGBT, you know, I guess they've got people noted for those particular overarching, I see they've got mental health, this lady, but you know, it all kind of crosses over, but I just wonder with, because it's always about who's representing, like, and how they're representing, what's that based on, as far as years of experience or just interest, respectively. So, I mean, you know, because I think about, there's so many people out in our community that are passionate about working with young people in health and old people in health and disability health. So, you know, how does it, what qualifies, I suppose, I mean, in the making up of this group, because there's so many people that want to advocate in this space. So.
I'll talk a little bit about that, because for me to come onto the role was not about my problem and bringing it to the table.
Yeah.
My role was to talk to the communities and say what's happening in a generic sense, but not to bring my problem to the table. Because you know, we've got personal things that we could bring to the table, but we're here to move on to about the safety and the quality of services rather than my issues. So I park my issues out there, but I take the learning and lived experience from that and bring it to the table and say, what can I make a change? What am I going to make a change? Am I going to be at loggerheads with my counterparts? Or are we going to, can they see my point of view? Because often clinicians might be just, it's a fix. And for me, it's like what you do. I'm doing this thing with my partner, I'm coming with them. So it's kind of like people who get there have a passion for it and want to drive something forward rather than bringing something like their complaints to the table. This is not the co-op of us.
And that's exactly the same for maternity consumers as well.
Yes.
And what we found is, and Georgie's probably got the hardest job out of everyone because she's on her own most of the time. But what we found is when we've been advertised on Facebook for different roles, and we found that some people, we interview people because you've got to go through the same process, but some governance isn't for them. So some of the maternity leaders, Liz has been quite protective of, and I say, can they not just come over here? But actually they much prefer to interview women, you know, for their satisfaction experience in maternity, or go and support breastfeeding day or neglect or
smoke-free day.
Or smoke-free and kind of get involved
day.
in all of that. They don't want to, whereas Georgie was quite clear that that's where she felt that she could add something. So I think it does depend on the level of where people want to make a difference as well. So how you work that up and get the right people, the logistics haven't kind of been drilled down yet, but we've certainly got a lot of learning from other DHBs, learning what worked and what didn't work.
Yeah.
So where are we at with formation of our council?
We're right at the beginning again, because we've been actively each month, fortnightly meeting with the other councils to see what worked and what didn't work. And so what we need is that support. We need actually a time to make it happen, and the board to say, this is on our radar and let's look at the Consumer Council. Can you have it done by 30 June, as an example?
Okay.
I'm not saying.
I'd be happy to support that. I think, you know, we've talked about this a number of times, and the board is very keen to make sure that we do have consumer input into not just the operations of the DHB, but to inform decision making. So I'd, you know, if that's a reasonable timeframe that you believe that this can be achieved within, then I'd be very happy to support that.
Jim, do you want to?
Oh, sure. I think it's no coincidence the 30th of June has been mentioned. Yeah.
I just wanted to just touch base on the what matters. And when we're thinking about putting together the terms of reference Consumer Council, one thing that really matters to me is kind of what you've talked about, that we, you know, that nothing about us without us, that we have consumer input into big ticket work that we're doing to make sure, you know, to help guide it along its way. But there's another side of what matters, and that's that the Consumer Council actually has the space and opportunity to say to us, regardless of what work we send to them, to say, actually, this is what matters to your community. And DHB, we want you to put this on your agenda, so that they also have the opportunity to be shaping what we do, not just contributing to what we are doing.
Yeah.
So that the big ticket what matters, and informing what matters to them in the context of projects or work streams that we're progressing.
I mean, it is a partnership. They're not just there as a reciprocal for everything, but you need them to read and look at and make a decision. And that's why those groupings of, you know, the clinical governance and Consumer Council meeting a few times a year to actually go, okay, where are we at? What matters to us? How does that inform the future?
So that's very much the approach that we've taken with our iwi partners, to, you know, to start with the discussion on what matters to you, so that we can then think about how that shapes the DHB, rather than just saying the DHB is working on this. What's your input into that? Yeah.
So you touched on a point I was about to say, was when you went out to the other DHBs to study their consumer councils, how did you find they, for want of a bit of a term, reconciled that with iwi advisors or iwi input?
They struggled a little bit. To be honest, they did struggle, but they didn't have the right connection or introduction for iwi.
Right.
And I'm just going to declare my conflict, because I work for the iwi Ngāti Porou at the moment, contracted. But, you know, if they'd made the connection rather than, you know, rushing around engaging people, it might have been a little bit more, they might have had more people. But we have to take on board that everyone is busy and people have roles, and the people who do come in, they are busy and they want to get things done. So they don't want to sit there for a 7-hour meeting.
I think you'll find in other DHBs too, it was very much people have responded to the Ministry and the Health Quality and Safety Commission. So some of it will have been, I'm not saying, I can't guarantee that everyone would have engaged with the iwi prior to setting it up. Some of these councils have been going for years. So they will have iwi connections because of that, how it naturally started. The reason for presenting this today, Tony, was to try and give you a snapshot of where we're at, because you can actually, you know, I've said to Jim, you know, because there's been numerous discussions with him and Jim and trying to move this forward, but it's not a transaction. It's actually about understanding where we've come from, what works and what doesn't work, and actually us having the privilege of sitting on the national group, having much more awareness of making sure we don't repeat the mistakes, or they're kind of learnings, really. They're not mistakes, they're learnings forward. So we've benefited from that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Can I just say, I loved your statement regarding getting everybody together at the outset rather than doing stuff and then inviting, because I think historically that's been governance 101, respect to iwi particularly, but certainly to get buy-in, to get collaborative. But I think we're at the starting point of something that we can do really well because of the learning. So, and I love the mataora and the Newarika Kaupapa. I think that's a beautiful narrative for this region, but certainly excited to see where we go. But yeah, I'm like our chair, very supportive. Cool.
Josh, did you have anything?
Yeah, just in the absence of the chair for Te Waioronuku Taimemea, it would probably be a great idea to connect our Māori relationship rōpū into this kaupapa. If we already have established relationships with iwi inside of our current makeup of things, it'll probably be a great idea to connect it in through there. I was just thinking of what Nan would probably say and recommend, and I've spent a lot of time with Nan. I'm pretty sure that he would be like, this is great. I personally do think that this is great. This is something that was presented to us and we heard from our community the last term. So this is fantastic to see this getting some legs under it, and I fully am supportive of this and look forward to a June, kind of firming things up in June. But in terms of iwi engagement and stuff, if Nga was here, I think he'd probably recommend an engagement with Te Waiora o Nuku Tai Memeha.
Thank you, Josh.
Congratulations, Georgie. I just want to say you've got the right person involved. Good networks, good relationships across all of the communities, not just Tokomaru Bay, where she's from. So, kia ora. Look forward to the good reports. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Can I ask, you've got the board support to get to this by the end of June, and I'm wondering if it would be useful if you checked in with the board in April, particularly if there's any decision points you need. So just an update of sort of progress and any directions or anything like that. Or sooner if you need it sooner.
Yeah, I mean, there'll have to be some sort of implementation plan because this is, we all have day jobs. So, yeah, absolutely, there will be check-in points.
Great.
Yeah, at this stage, I mean, and obviously if we felt that we couldn't, we will aim to meet that time frame. But yeah, we will certainly, if there was any variance to that, we would certainly be coming back.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming and joining us.
Can I just say, you said the board would support this to be done by the 30th of June. Does that mean that you'd be happy to work alongside us to get to that point, not just for us to provide you with something? Because I think as a joint, we'll probably get more benefit from that to make sure that we're on the right path from start instead of telling you or presenting to you what it is that we're wanting to do.
Happy to.
Great.
Happy to. So we can, maybe it might be that initially you might need to have a discussion with Hui Te Rangi, Josh, to if as an ongoing testing mechanism.
Great. Perfect. Thank you.
Hai tēnā.
Yeah, tino pai.
Very good. Thank you very much, and for our community members listening on live stream, do spread the word that we are setting up a mechanism to get a stronger community voice into the DHB. So kia ora. Okay. So go back to our board pack. Now up to the performance dashboard, page 17. So Jim, if I can pass it over to you to highlight any particular things that you think need highlighting for us.
Yes, similar issues around immunisation and the difficulty in lifting that. Today is the day when we are meeting with our primary care partners this afternoon. You're going to say something?
Yeah, the numbers are improved since the last 3 months. These ones have improved for them, and that's because of the detailed work that they undertook in terms of newborn enrolment.
I see. Enrollment. Which is the second indicator that's on that set of indicators there around. You'll see the huge jump in performance in relationship to that. They always said it was in terms of their reporting mechanisms and that they would fix it, and they have. So that is good. The good thing about it, A, it's fixed, and B, is that it was good before. It's just that it wasn't reported as such, rather than poor performance now made different. And also, they are really needing to get back on top of that advice for smokers to quit within primary care. So that is one that we will also be raising with them this afternoon as well. On that first page there, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you might want to highlight to you. Maybe the other one there perhaps is around those diagnostic waiting times. which are looking very good. I have to take hats off to the team within radiology. They have worked extremely hard to get those on track. So that again too was partly reporting and partly actually just making sure that those last remaining people are able to get their CTs and MRIs on time.
Jim, how's the bowel screening rollout going? I know it doesn't report on numbers yet, too early, but I just wondered if there's an update.
I can probably get you an update on that for next month, but we do know that we're getting some really impressive results out of the approach that we're taking in relationship to that. So we are getting over 80% return rates on for people within those communities that we're focusing in on utilising our Tairāwhiti way rather than the national rollout. So that's where we are delivering kits to people and in smaller communities and where we knew that it would be difficult to get things posted to people and understanding of people about what was required, and that is working. People are able to turn around their kits and get them back into the system. And meanwhile, the mail out is occurring for other members of the community as well.
Is there a follow-up if they're not returned?
Yes. Yeah. That is the point. Where we are contacting people personally by the providers, Hauora and Tairāwhiti Health, and delivering kits to people, and then coming back. When they get the nod, come back and get it. And if there's not a response, then going back and checking up to see what's happened for people.
Well, so I just, one that's been bugging me for a little while, and I see it's creeped up again, is the alcohol-related ED presentations of our young people. It's all heading in the wrong direction. I'm just trying to figure out is there a driver, and I realise he's looking into the holiday period. And,
yes, I think you may be seeing the Christmas New Year period there.
Yeah, but it's still heading in the wrong direction. I expect there's a bit of an R&D block in there, Jane.
Well, and lots and lots of young people in the district over that period of time, and sometimes not even just with R&D, and also coming to our emergency department for support and checking period of time. So because they're visitors, so I do think you would expect to see that one drop away again over a period of time. The other thing about that too is that it is a developmental. It's part of the service.
That's part of an SLM.
SLM, yes.
But it's also mandatory reporting that was established 2 years ago. So what you're saying is a more constant. So it comes as a result of being asked a question that wasn't asked previously.
So hence the very low starting point on this particular.
Getting into it, and establishing.
That's why it wasn't relative. That's what the two ends of the graph are not relative.
So it's just what it's doing is you're saying that the question is being asked more and more as it becomes routine on ED to ask those questions. It's mandatory now. You can't move past the screen with a young person without having asked the question. So you're getting that information. There's no intervention at that point.
It's just data collection.
It's data collection.
Obviously, there will be intervention if the alcohol use is the primary reason why the person is in the emergency department. But quite often, the alcohol use is incidental and maybe a causative factor, but not the primary reason why the person is there. Right. So, what I'm saying too is that we're trying to establish what the picture looks like as well. So this is in that system level measure is around what is the impact of alcohol on that age group, and how can we measure that? An easy way to measure that is seeing what it looks like in the emergency department. So we do have to draw conclusions. Once we've got some reliable data, we then need to draw conclusions about that and say, what does this mean?
What sort of time frame are we looking for that amount of data to be able to be utilised in that sort of space?
I think
because 10 years you've lost an entire generation just about,
I think you need a year's data of good, clean data to be able to see what the what the pattern is looking like, what the background level is. I mean, you're going to see peaks and troughs as at Christmas time in the summertime, and but then what was the background level looking like, and also digging into that, because you can see that's in 10 to 24-year-olds. So we need to see what the pattern looks. What does it look like at 10-year-olds? What does it look like at 24-year-olds? One would hope there's quite a difference in that. What does that tell us? Is there any ethnic trends within this? Are there any male? I'm sure you'll see a male-female trend in this. All those sorts of things that you can draw conclusions from. And then one of the things that we've got coming up is a whole position statement around alcohol for the DHB and how we are working around reasserting the place of alcohol in society and in our community, especially from a health perspective. So this is also informing that work, and that's part of that system level measure as well.
We recently signed a position statement on it.
Yeah, because it was actually that triggered me when I was reading.
I'm sure that's correct.
Where that's up.
So Jim, you said this stat is for alcohol-related ED presentations.
Yeah.
So it might be for, I put my hand through a glass window because I was drunk and I'm bleeding out. Does the data collection differentiate between actually just turning out? The other thing is, does it differentiate between alcohol and other substances?
No, the requirement is to ask the question: have you been? Is there alcohol? Have you had any imbibing prior to this?
So it's collecting all the data. So it says that related to, but it may be that you.
So this is a national data set requirement.
Yep. But can we tweak it? Could we say
not without? So this.
How do you want to tweak it?
Have you? If the question simply is, have you drunk alcohol? Has alcohol? Have you consumed alcohol
in the last X period of time? Is the question.
The next question would be, how much have you consumed? And then, have you consumed any other substances? So you get a broader picture with 3 questions.
Yeah. Okay.
It's simply saying, have you drunk alcohol in the last 12 hours? Well, most people, that's what they use.
Yeah, I guess so, but no, but
Getting a baseline data set for a purpose, that's doing a little bit more detailed work, and we would need to work actively with our ED department to say, where does this raise in terms of your priorities when you're dealing with people coming in the front door?
I guess the other thing sort of as a national level measure, we need to ensure that we're
tweaking the same way, otherwise it doesn't help.
So it's apples and apples.
Yeah.
But like, I guess what Tony's saying too, based on what I'm hearing from young people, that there was kind of this discussion around more young people will be inclined to take a drug to get the high, and the basis of that drug more than drinking alcohol, so to speak. So there's been a shifting, I guess, mechanism to being in the zone of it all, partying as such. So that was kind of conversations I was having with young people, is that they're more inclined to take a substance that will give them the heightened kind of vibe of being party mode than drinking excessively. There was some shifting, and I just wondered, how can we collect or know that space? Because I know with MDMA, I get those letters mixed up, but taking ecstasy or anything else, how would we know if there's been a shift in around alcohol, drug use, etc., if we're just focusing on alcohol?
So this is around the significant abuse of alcohol in our community, across the fabric of our community. Let's just be really clear.
Yeah, I think that's what's driving the questioning. It's actually understanding what's happening here amongst our young people.
Sure. And alcohol is number one.
Yeah.
So start with number one.
That's the point.
It is number one.
That's what Meredith is asking, I think.
So it hasn't changed, that there hasn't been a shifting respect to something.
Not at this point. But you're actually mixing the method too, because if you wanted to get a status for young people on the amount of drug use, it's an entirely different approach you might take than people turning up at ED. So ED is the place where people come to get emergency treatment. And so in that space, you're dealing with a particular group of people coming through the door, and it's to do with management of the ED and what you can do at ED.
Okay.
And actually,
I'm going to suggest you're probably going to get more factual information about asking about alcohol, and you're probably going to get about other substance use as well.
And it's illegal. And
there's no reason why you should, just measure things that are easy to measure. That may not be helpful, but this is definitely one where you're going to get much better data around alcohol use than you are going to get about
But it's not a good measure of alcohol use.
No, it is a,
Through easy.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it's an opportunity. I mean, we're talking about 10 to 24-year-olds. We're talking about young, older people. I would be asking them, what have you imbibed? Is it alcohol?
What have you taken?
What have you taken?
Well, naturally, in the circumstances, then, if it was a 10-year-old that's going to tell somebody, I've just had X, whatever, alcohol, then you are, our staff are going to follow that up. And all of these children of that age are directly followed up post being an ED by our outreach nurses. So there's a follow-up process around that routinely and automatically. So it's not left at that point. But yeah, it's a 10 to 24 age range, but most of the people in this you're going to be talking with are going to be older than 10 or so. I'll give you a profile of what it looks like with a bit more detail.
Interesting just to see. I think it's an opportunity, and if we're specifically collecting the data on alcohol, for a couple of more questions, we could build a better database.
Therein lies the challenge. Instigating the new process of asking the question has taken quite significant time to get into mandatory fields. So you cannot move past it. So then extending that also requires further mandatory fields to be included into those questions. And then we need to understand the why.
So, we could probably go round and round on this, and maybe it might be useful if we ask our management to give some thought to the discussion that we've had, and maybe come back to us with basically the pros and cons and technical issues around extending that data collection.
Because it's almost a community health thing.
A public health thing.
Yeah.
So I think we might just leave that discussion there. Josh, did you have anything on forward?
It's great though to have a conversation about some of the indices on here because they're there to be able to give us a ready reckoner about some key things about what's happening within our community and within our health services. So it's good to have the corridor on them.
And there is the agreement that the rollout of the position statement includes an action plan.
Right. I just have one question on hospital events, and it probably reflects my understanding of how these indicators work together. But it looks like we're wanting high bed utilisation, but low discharges. They kind of seem like they're playing against each other.
So we can manipulate bed utilisation in relationship to the number of discharges. So if we reduce the number of discharges because we were managing people's health in the community better, or we were managing people at the front door better, then we would reduce the number of discharges, and then we would reduce the number of beds available. So our bed utilisation would stay up. So you really want to be operating in that 80% plus mode for your beds.
We would physically reduce the number of
we would
beds
take beds out of service basically if we had less people coming through the hospital.
Okay, so it's kind of more like how they work together in terms of productivity.
Yes, those are really productivity measures really.
My questions is around the acute readmission rate. The 75 plus is taking a jump up, and I know that's a population that can have little events. But how can we be reassured it's not related to discharge planning? And I'm hoping that the healthy ageing team that's coming up in the future might support that. But I do know there are some issues with poor discharge planning, and so how do we know they're not connected? Like, are they getting all the services, or are we flicking them out too early, or a lot they require? I just think there's a little bit of a jump there.
Yes, it is. And you can see that in the graph on the right-hand side there, that month really sticks out because we're under our target most every other month. And so we've gone from the usual around about 20 people a month up to 30.
And that can happen with small numbers.
1 month. So, it is small numbers, but I don't know any reason why that would necessarily be at that particular period of time.
Yeah, but it would be good to have a look at those 30 people and see what the discharge process was around that. Did we plan it ahead when on admission, or did we turf them out the day before without putting any supports in place?
Sure. And those 30 people will be have been reviewed in M&M meetings, mortality and morbidity meetings, because that's an indicator that is reviewed at M&M meetings within services. Mainly those will be within medicine. And also remember that sometimes that is not to do with discharge planning. So these are sometimes unrelated events.
True.
Yeah.
And part of this would have been in January, first part of January.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
So I just had one question. It's regarding ambulatory affairs. I mean, I don't even know whether it fits in with this framework, but just I was at an incident in the weekend and it took over an hour and a half for the ambulance to, so that's what I was thinking. I don't think it's to do with ASH. But I wanted to know, Jim, do we get a board report about the ambulance service per se, respect to what consumers don't know about that service? So I haven't seen it in its own individual space, but respect to people understanding that service, because not showing up for an hour and a half person everyone's waiting for, etc. But do we get updates as to how they are dealing with the day-to-day and respect to their service provision out in the public domain? Because I had people saying, actually they won't show up for this, they don't show up for this or that in this dialogue that happens. So do we get a report from ambulance?
No, we don't.
It's a different
we don't fund St John, but that's no excuse why we don't know about what's happening. But because we're not getting any reports of that nature that I've ever heard. So that would be helpful if people report those instances. And Heather's looking at me.
Well, as the chair of the area committee, I can tell you what the biggest issue is mainly the local ambulance people don't know about that call, because the decision's made in Auckland on the 111 call, and they make the decision whether it's urgent or not. So if people experience that, they need to write a formal complaint to get it dealt with, because locally they don't even know it was happening. So they're sitting at the station waiting for a call out, and someone's lying on the road for an hour and a half and they don't know. Right. So you have to log. It's the same as here. If there's any incidents, we've got to just log them, and then there'll be an investigation, because local people got no idea.
And that's exactly what happens with maternity when we hear cases where women are called for an ambulance and then they've actually birthed on their own at home. And I contact Shane, who's the leads St John's, and he investigates it, and then it comes out of his hands and goes higher up. And then there's an element of waiting, and I waited 3 months for a response on one, and Shane kept apologising, but it's their system. And they looked, and it is the higher where the call goes. They didn't prioritise it because they had a system in place that if all their crew were out, that Shane is the person to be contacted, and he would have gone out. But he never received that call because of where it goes up to the national office. Yes. And they didn't prioritise it. So the systems, and I know that was being looked into from the last incident that I put through in the past report that I asked for. Okay. I need to. Yeah. I just investigate that.
Put in complaints.
Okay. So thank you. Move along. I can to my report. As I mentioned before, we had a nice quiet time over January, but our hospital services were running as expected, and I think we should also all note that there was no seasonal dip. The hospital services were actually busy. So, and particularly ED with high number of admissions coming through there. We've talked about R&B, about getting a detailed process, but again, did also just want to reiterate my thanks to Jim and the team for keeping all of our health services operating when everyone else was relaxing. On ministers' meetings, the Māori chairs have a caucus, and we've met with Minister Henare and separately with the head of the implementation team for the health system review to progress discussions from a Māori perspective with those two folks.
as you would expect, the Māori Health Authority was a particular focus of those discussions, but also the whole of system effectiveness for Māori. So that was that's the particular sort of streams of conversation we've been having with the Minister and with the implementation team. National chairs met in February, and that included a meeting with both the Minister and Ashley, and also separately with the head of the implementation unit. So national chairs are also contributing at that level, although, you know, I have to say, as previously, it's more of a briefing rather than an input. So this process is very much driven from the centre, and the space and pace remains the same. So you'll recall that government has, you know, largely supports the direction of the review, and are working at pace to get its policy decisions worked through. Manautaki met in January, and that was Nara and I's last meeting of chairing, so we've handed that baton on to Taranaki. That meeting included the Health Share AGM. So Health Share is our 5 DHB group that supports us with things like Manautaki, but also like our internal audit and those kinds of services. So they had their AGM, and it also included discussions on the clinical portal. And then I also really wanted to just highlight the workshop that we had with our partners. Was it just last week? Or week before?
Week 12.
It was brilliant. It was a session to hear from our partners about what matters to them, and particularly across a number of key questions about stages of life and what's important at different stages of life. And it's been I think I said to Nicola and Jim, it's been a long time since I went to a strategic planning session that A, had 50 people in it, and B, those 50 people were contributing throughout the session and came out the end of it fizzing. So that was great. So thank you for putting that together, and for making sure that we are including others in this planning process that we're in at the moment. I think it's really, really important. And then I guess just in terms of our most immediate priority, of course, we've got the vaccination rollout. Jim will talk a bit more about it in his report, but we actually start here on Saturday with our order workers and their whānau. So we're rolling.
You can make cups of tea.
So that is my report. Na's not here. Josh, did you want to add anything from Tairāwhiti or Nukutai?
I will just mention a couple of things. One's already included in this report. It's the addition of the new Te Waiora o Nukutai Memeha member, Rāniera Proctor. So it's great to have Rāniera around the table. And the second thing was around just to remind us that Te Waiora o Nukutai Memeha are having a strong look at its membership and what that will be in terms of iwi aspiration, iwi kōrero. The intent is to wānanga around that kaupapa with iwi in order to be able to land on what representation looks like around Te Waiora o Nukutai Memeha in regards to bringing kaupapa Māori and Māori health outcomes inside of our health board. And what's really great too is that the current members aren't precious about their chairs. You know, they're actively inside of that hui. They were saying those that were community members, still iwi members, but around there as community, were saying, you know, I'm not precious about where I am. I will give up my seat today if it means that this will happen for iwi or this iwi will get this seat. So I thought that was really great in terms of intent. Obviously, we're not rushing through that and going, yes, you off them on, that kind of thing, and which is why there's a commitment to wānanga around what representation looks like around Te Waiora Unuku Taimimeha. So yeah, those are the probably two most important things. Everything else that was on the agenda, a big chunk of that is also laced into our agenda today too. So
Thank you, Josh.
kei te pai.
Did anyone have any questions of me or Josh? Oh, okay. So item 6.4, Jim, your report, and it's at page 19 of our pack.
Thank you. I'll take it as read. I just wanted to highlight a few things there. So I think it's the first month this year where we've been ahead of budget. So that was a nice change in relationship to our previous months. We're still carrying a lot of additional accrued expenditure within there, or provisions made within there. And we do have some additional revenue that we are not putting in there at this point until we're absolutely and completely 100% certain around that. So it's over $500,000 worth of that at the moment. There, I've just highlighted those things a little bit further down the page there, and we've still got a little bit in the back pocket in terms of phasing for staffing costs in the second or the last 5 months of the year. We are seeing some changing around from Pharmac in terms of the estimate of our expenditure on medications in the district, that is medications within the community, and currently that's around about $400,000 higher than what we had budgeted or what they had signalled when we were doing the budgeting from last year. So that's a significant amount, but that is on the way down. So that may still come back before year end. And we are also making that non-specific accrual over $1 million in there of expenditure that we are accruing around the Holidays Act. And other items that may or may not turn up as the year goes on. Still a little bit of a negative around COVID-19 costs, and of course in the coming months that will ramp up a little bit with expenditure around the vaccination program, but I'll come back to that later on.
Ask a question there while you're still on it. So the non-specific accrual, just to make sure we all get that. So we're not yet clear of our actual Holidays Act liabilities and other liabilities that might come along. So we've factored that money out of, like, we've expensed it.
Yeah, we're making a provision against what those things may be.
And so if those things don't materialise to the extent that we are envisaging, then that will make our bottom line improve.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so we won't know really what finally our Holidays Act liability is until we get to that famous day when we make the last estimation and payment for one of our staff members, which will probably be at least 12 months away. And so that, as you know, goes back over about 9 or 10 years now, that liability. And the rest is around our knowledge that there will be additional expenses within the DHB that we haven't captured, but so generally it doesn't work out to be quite as much as we provide for. But
predominantly it's timing issues of purchase orders not receipted in the time frame we're expecting, or invoices that are out in the work stream that we don't know about. And it enables us to counter some of the movements in retirement provisions, long service leave and things like that we calculate at year end. So we move it so that you see at least a proportion of it each month, rather than it all being hidden in period 13.
Potentially spent before period 13 arrives.
Yes. The other thing that I didn't put in the end, Kath will know the answer to this, but we do have a problem at the moment around leave liability. Total leave liability is considerably higher than what we would normally expect because people aren't taking leave. So yeah. Yeah. Well,
Not sure that would solve the problem.
Leave
Take it or leave it.
from the top.
It normally does.
Yes, it is happening, not just.
It is. It's a nationwide phenomenon. Yeah, so it's not just. It's also in CME.
It's like work.
Yeah. So just on through what you mentioned before, Kim, with over the Christmas New Year period, we didn't have any kind of a reduction really in service delivery within hospital services there. So, but when you look at the overall graph, point out again that it's really flattened off in the last year or 2 years now across those months, much higher beat to beat. But definitely there in January on top of page 21, a record month in terms of internal medicine admissions. And but then just down the page further, that fantastic looking graph in relationship to admission of children to hospital, and a huge benefit accruing to the community as a result of that. ED arrivals at another world record for us in relationship to December and January. And but sterling work from the team there within the emergency department and our wider services, particularly our medical registrars, etc., and being able to provide appropriate care for those people, which means that they don't all have to be admitted to the hospital. Just my usual graphs there.
Can I just ask on your ED arrivals, could that really be up in April or May? Is that a reporting issue or real?
There was an event in April and May.
Oh, that's
Yes, it was real.
Everybody was locked at home, not out there passing on bugs to each other. They weren't trickling off things that they weren't having heart attacks. Yeah. So yes, it's a useful device for some purposes, but probably not something that everybody wants to do every year. But it's good that you notice it. You saw the whole. The planned care. So we are definitely really gearing up around planned care. We have been able to, even though we had, the usual period of time where we weren't doing planned care, which is only 2 weeks this year, but it has had an effect of just bumping up some of those figures that you're going to see coming up shortly around planned care services. And there, Funda just talked about before around one of the biggest things there around being pharmac. Our indices of our other sort of key indices, we're a little bit behind on smoking, but give a bit of a reminder there about that faster cancer treatment, good month. And immunisation, still trying to pick that up a bit more. Planned care, the thing that's holding us back in that percentage figure there as it relates to the delivery of minor cases, and we know that that's just a reporting issue, and that we will fix that for you and over the next few months, and we are definitely still behind in a number of those elective services performance indicators. You'll see.
Sorry, just get some a wee bit of a translation. So with your treatment waiting times, ESPI 5, breaching your 4 months, you've got volume with certainty. So what? And then a total waiting. Sorry, page 25, 26. Yeah. I'm just trying to establish what certainty is, and then further down you've got a graph around certainty.
Yes.
Total assured. I just want to know understand the terminology there. What exactly does it mean when you've got 112 here with volume with certainty over 4 months, and then further down in February 21 you've got 599 total waiting over 4 months. So I'm just trying to. So bottom of page 26 and beginning of page 27.
Yeah, okay. I guess certainty is an old term that when the booking system was implemented, probably goodness knows how many years ago, when we went from waiting lists to the booking system, the key difference there was people used to be put on a waiting list and eventually over a period of time, sometimes a long period of time, they would get to the top and they would get their procedure or their surgery. And in the booking system, people are assessed and given certainty, A, that you meet the criteria and you're going to get a first specialist assessment, or you've met the criteria and you're going to get an operation. So that's what certainty is about. And if you don't meet that, then your care transfers back to your general practitioner or generally that's what happens. So that's what certainty is. So it means that we've assessed this person and definitely you're going to get the first specialist assessment or the surgery. So that's what that words mean. So that's the key thing. So the current settings are that people who have certainty need to have their first specialist assessment within 4 months or their procedure within 4 months. So that's what those things are measuring there. So at the bottom of, for SB5, at the bottom of those 2 pages up there is just showing the numbers of people by specialty who are reaching that time frame. And then there's another graph there of the whole bunch of people.
So the whole bunch of people don't have that certainty, is that what you're saying?
They have certainty, but they've been waiting longer than 4 months.
Right. So we've got 500, nearly 600 people that are waiting longer than 4 months. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and in fact, actually, the good thing to note too is that is actually SB2. It says SB5, it should actually be SB2 because that is actually if you're waiting for an FSA, the 599 on the bottom on page 27 in February. Right. So there's 1,313 people who have been given certainty and are waiting for a first specialist assessment because we're definitely going to see you, and 599 of those people have been waiting longer than 4 months.
So your question about the 112, that's like a monthly?
Except that the 112 is people who are waiting for treatment. That's SB5.
Yeah, because it's so SB5 on the top of the next one down.
Exactly.
So it's not supposed to
and
be.
That's not supposed to. It should be
right.
SB2.
Okay. So that's where
I just spotted that because it actually says FSA. So that's why the 112 doesn't equate with the 599.
Yes, that's where I was.
So a similar question, Jim. I noticed on page 25 it says we're ahead of target relating to the FSAs.
Yes. But
Maybe,
still got
maybe
people longer than 4 months. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm looking at the table on top of page 26. ENT, 499 waiting, 246 waiting longer than 6 months. Ophthalmology, 176 waiting more than 6 months. And neurology, 48. Those are really disappointing figures, and I think quite alarming, particularly urology and ENT. I mean, ENT from my layman's perspective, but having experienced it with my son, is around rangatahi and really important formative, those surgeries and procedures for a young person involved with ENT have actually lifelong impacts if not addressed or left too long. So I'm really concerned.
Sure. So it is important to recognise that those people with more urgent conditions would have been seen. So these, not so much comfort for those people who are waiting for those FSAs are people with conditions that are assessed as a lower priority. However, absolutely want to clear those out. And we've just, with the help of our colleagues at Lakes DHB, have secured some additional ENT time to be able to work specifically on that and any treatment that is required out of that. We believe that we've been able to clear out those other smaller ones like the gynecology, for instance. We are having difficulty around dermatology about seeking out a provider, but they've got a contact within Hawke's Bay to be able to provide that service there. Ophthalmology, we have just recruited another registrar to go alongside our ophthalmologist to get some additional work going there, and have put out an offer for a second ophthalmologist for Tairāwhiti to come and work for us to gear that up. And urology, persistent problem there around getting enough capacity locally. That's a visiting service, and so we are trying to get more going on. But there's another paper later in the papers that will help with that as well. Not so much episodes, but with treatment as well.
So, Jim, is it mostly recruiting, that difficulties with recruiting? Is that the biggest reason for, say, something in ENT numbers?
ENT is yes and no. We have been working with primary care around ENT referrals. Our GP liaison has been spearheading that. We believe that some of the things that are being referred seen by a specialist could actually be dealt with and work with better within primary care. So we are looking a little bit at that as a way of managing the inflow there. But we've had a resignation of, well, he's left now. One of our ENT has left. So we are recruiting, and the good news is that there are ENT surgeons out there to be recruited. But in the interim, that's where we've got that coverage arrangements with Lakes DHB coming here, the clinicians coming here to deliver that service. So that is, so that issue around ENT has been there for some period of time. It is not so much COVID related, although it did get worse over the last year as a result of that. And I guess similarly around ophthalmology, even though we've got our ophthalmologist and the registrar working, it's not enough capacity to meet the demand in our community. That's why we have gone out to recruit a second ophthalmologist.
And the comment around urology, you said that there wasn't enough capacity. Is that
it's a visiting service. It's a hot service around the country for capacity.
If we use practitioners, will that reduce the numbers? No.
It would. We are actually, good point. We are actually utilising our nurse practitioner in urology at this precise moment.
And I have it on good authority that she gave a fantastic service.
Yeah, she's really good. But still, having gone through the service myself, it's like 48 people waiting for more than 6 months for that PSA is just really
not good.
Not really flat show.
I think we are all highly conscious of the impact on the people who are waiting, and it's good to hear that we are, moving hard on trying to get the specialists and the specialist capacity into the hospital too. Is there anything else you wanted to? We're actually going to finish our public session before we release the copy, so that will
hold out a little bit longer. Robin's the only thing.
Sorry.
I was just going to highlight this activity there around Severity Assessment Code 1 and 2 events over the last 2 months there. Amelia has put in that detail for you around what is happening there, and
That's like assault. Sorry.
Yeah. There's a report being developed around that. And then COVID-19, sorry about that first preparedness now response mechanism. I was going to take that piece out. It got left in. Vaccine. So Saturday is begin with our rollout of the vaccine here in Tairāwhiti. We've got, I think it's actually 38,000 people to vaccinate before the end of the year. And so that'll be the biggest event of the country has ever experienced and of that nature, and certainly here as well. We have got pretty much got our plans in place how we're going to complete that. You will know that the vaccination program is occurring in tiers. And the reasoning for that is in this current situation that we are in the country, we don't have community transmission in the country, and so that is then set the vaccination program to address the border and those people most in line to either be exposed to COVID-19 or then pass it on to others. So that is our border workers. In our case here in Tairāwhiti, those are the workers at the port who work for Eastland Port, ISO, and third one, which is, can't remember, customs, and also our staff who go there to do the swabbing. So that's the first bunch, and then their household contacts. So the idea then is these are the people most likely to be exposed to the virus, most likely to then, if they become infected, actually transmit it to their household members, and then it becomes disseminated to the community. So get that group done first, and then after that is tier 2. We don't have a date for tier 2 to be started yet, but I think our experience around tier 1 was that we were getting ready and then told you have to be ready within 2 weeks. So we're probably about a week later than that, 2 weeks. So we are definitely getting ready for tier 2. Tier 2 includes all of our frontline health workers and also this is 2 batches of it, all of our frontline health workers and all of the people in essential services such as the police, fire, emergency New Zealand and St John, and AIDS residential care workers, workers within NGOs, our colleagues within Tairāwhiti Health and Ngāti Hauora, for instance, those people in frontline positions where they're interacting with members of the public on a regular basis. Again, to protect them, to protect the capacity of our health system, and also to reduce the chances of any transmission from that back into the community again. And then in tier 3 is the wider population. So we have been doing some work around that about how we would roll that out. We had a very useful meeting with iwi chief executives on Friday around how that will work for our Māori population here in Tairāwhiti and how we would plan for that and the rollout. We've got a few modifications that we want to make to that to be more responsive around vulnerability within our population, which may be different than other populations around the country. So that is kind of a nutshell. We've got a opportunity to pass on some information to our border workers around how the program will work. We have chosen to vaccinate the household contacts at the same time as the workers. We think that this is a whānau thing that people are doing for their families and for their community, and that it's a joint event that you shouldn't really be separating, the workers out from their important other people in their lives, and so that's why we're doing it that way. So 9:30 Saturday morning. Let's go.
Have we got enough vaccinators yet?
Yes, we have enough vaccinators for this part of the program, and we have got, we're steadily increasing the number of vaccinators that we have. We have taken, right from the word go, been working with our other providers around vaccinators that they would have. So roughly what we are thinking that we need to do is that when we get to that community point, that we will have, let's say, 3 teams of people out there vaccinating, and say we'll start out the coast, out west, and in the city all at the same time. So we're not going to start in the city and then eventually get up there and out there. We recognise the importance of vaccination 100% on the coast, vaccination 100% out in the west, and 100% here in Tairāwhiti itself. And so, so we're going to give the message that it's important everybody gets vaccinated, and we're coming to you now. We're not saying you're not so important, we'll get to you later. Everybody's important. We can't do everybody at once, so we do have to get out there, but we're going to make that maximum coverage across our district, so that everybody knows how important it is, and that we will reflect to that importance with what we're doing.
So this is the 2-shot one, isn't it?
Yes.
So we have an opportunity.
But the one that is disseminated more widely in the community may not be. It may be one of the single shot vaccines.
Okay, so we're not 100% on what that might be yet.
No, I mean, as a country, we've got deals on 4. We've got enough doses for way more than the total population of the country. But I think what we've said and why at the moment it's the Pfizer vaccine, which is the one that needs to be stored, at minus 70 degrees. There's 2 tanks in the country where the vaccine's coming into at the moment to be stored at minus 70. When you've got the amount required in each different part of the country, it gets taken out, it gets stored there, it gets sent here. We've got 5 days to use it. It needs to be diluted with saline before you actually give it.
Just thinking in terms of catching young people in our community for their measles and the likes, is there an opportunity with the second shot for that to be addressed or not?
No, you have to wait for measles. You have to wait 2 weeks.
Sure.
Is it
There's obviously a
influenza
protocol
2 weeks and
that we
others
need
1
to
week?
follow here.
There's some that are 1 month and some 2 weeks, so you can't double up.
Sure. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, no, my point being that if we're going to spread the net wide enough that we catch all of our community, it is a real opportunity to capture some of those other pressures that we've had or challenges that we've had. I mean, it may mean 3 visits or 3 shots. So, yeah.
We probably won't be able to do, I mean, we're getting people through the door again and re-establishing the importance of vaccination for people, and maybe we can check on that. And what I've said is that we will have 38,000 people sitting with us for 30 minutes. That's a lot of time to be talking about how's your other vaccinations going, but we won't be able to do those things at the time. But there may be other things that we'll be able to talk about at that period of time, and we're going to try and utilise that time as much as possible while we've got literally a captive audience of people that are waiting before they can leave.
Ask about their substance use.
I just think it's a really exciting opportunity.
We'll invite you along. You could ask them about substance use.
It's a rare opportunity.
Yeah, but so for this particular approach, being mindful, this is the first of a group of people who are going to be receiving vaccinations. Need to be mindful that they may not want us to be intruding other than to receive their vaccinations at this point. Once this first group is through, then I think there's opportunity.
Sure. I was thinking more of those remote communities and things like that where remote rural.
I don't think we should underestimate the fact that those rural communities are actually being serviced really well by our current providers who are actually tasked with doing that whole of health response, but it may give them a better opportunity to actually do a bit of increased focus there.
Doses are you expecting to administer in the first term?
Around about 300 to 350.
Are we going to, do something with the Herald as the first person having a vaccination in Tairāwhiti?
Possibly not. We're thinking about that, but obviously that will be very much up to the people whether they do want to do that. I do have to say, and no, I won't. I won't.
Have we already identified champions with respect to their comment there on page 7?
In terms of champions within communities? Yes, the iwi have a network of champions within communities, and the iwi are 100% behind this program and are mobilising their champions to be part of that as we roll out. With this group that will be vaccinated over the next few days, and then more widely as we go further.
Okay. Very good.
Thanks, Jen.
Is there anything else on your page that you wanted to highlight, Jen? And are there any comments or questions from the Zoom? So 6.5 is the financial report.
Yep. So as Jim's already mentioned, January's result was a good result overall. A number of factors influencing that. So income played a large part in it. So we received 460,000 in relation to MCP work that we've done locally. Most of that was because it was out of scope of the original project. But we will see a recharge from health share at a later date, but that will be CapEx. So We've seen the income for the work we've done locally. We saw healthy levels of ACC in the period, which looks to have been a catch-up in outpatients, orthotics and non-acute rehab. So there's a little bit of boom and bust in some of the services as they do catch-ups. Payroll, very good result overall, driven by a reduction in leave liability, which you'd expect to see after the Christmas period. Clinical supplies, it was a high month for blood and pharmacy, but they were offset by savings elsewhere. Most notably implants and prosthesis, and patient transport is still running low at the moment. I don't anticipate that will stay that way. Facilities seem to have a bad month right the way across all their areas. The forecast to year end at the moment that we've sent into the ministry is a $5.9 million deficit against the $4 million deficit budget. That has, believe it or not, improved in the last few months. So I think we were around $2.5 million adrift from the budget we set. It's slowly coming down.
So on that, we will be working towards trying to get back to.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
It might be that we'll get back though, because we've got some of that expenditure that is, for instance, the COVID-19 additional expenditure. We'll still should put us over. Well, will put us over budget. And then there are some of those factors like the pharmac costs. If they don't come back, we'll have a problem.
And we continue to rely quite heavily on outsourced services. The only other thing you might want to be aware of in advance is February, March sees a increase in staffing costs due to the transaction of shift leave allowances. So they all come in and they can be quite a bulk. There's no telling exactly how large that will be. So it's just if you see a movement in the other direction, be in nursing predominantly, but there'll be others through SMOs as well.
So I think we might have the discussion on the forecast when we talk about the sustainability actions. Yep. Okay. Any questions on the financial report that would not be better addressed in the next session? Okay. We've got no reports from subcommittees from the public session on this one. 7.1 is primary mental health and addiction services. Updating and noting report. Nicola?
Yep, just trying to get back to that, Doc. Sorry, page was it on?
47.
Right. So this is really a noting paper to indicate over the last year and a half we've been working with funds saved in the 18 to 21 year. 18 to 22 years, sorry, there's a total sum of $900,000 that we've managed to push into new investment. It was agreed that we would invest that into our more rural populations, and we've been working with our preferred providers on design for that, and we're now underway with that piece of work.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from anyone? No, Kapai, thank you very much. 8.1 revised board dates. Rachel, I believe this is just so that we can confirm the shift of the December date to the 14th of December.
Correct. It was mentioned at the December meeting. We can look at your calendars, but we're just making sure everyone's happy.
But I think we confirmed, given what day we had our December meeting last year. We'd all be happier to have it on the 14th of December. And 8.2 is the paper to approve Turanga Nui Akiwa's recommendation to appoint Daniel Proctor to Hauora or Nupitaimi Meha following Angus's resignation. Is there anything you wanted to add on that one, Josh?
It was fully accepted and endorsed by Te Waiora o Nuku Taimimeha.
Okay, thank you. From the looks around the board, yes, we absolutely support that as well.
Totally.
So our welcome to Daniel, and we'll look forward to working with Daniel. And now is the time for the board to agree to move into public excluded. So to that end, I resolve to exclude the public from the remainder of the meeting in reliance on the statutory provisions and for the agenda as shown on the published agenda.
Saying goodbye to them.
Thank you very much to the public who have joined us. It's a pleasure to have you with us again, and we will be looking forward to seeing you again next month as you continue to participate in this part of our local democracy.